Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Transformation Leaders Podcast. We're here every Wednesday, and today's Wednesday. And so here we are again. Going to introduce Sean, my sidekick and partner in crime or co-host here. And today we're going to talk to you about, guess what? AI again. And so specifically, the title is going to be Crossing the Generative AI Chasm, and kind of a general preference of, you've heard it or seen at least a lot of our shows. And so I think you guys are knowing that we're getting to the point where things are starting to get pretty ubiquitous, just bigger, better, faster, and crazier. Still drinking from the fire hose after, 2.5 years now, it feels like, and probably no end in sight for all of you either. But in any event, we're going to get started today talking about value that you're going to get from like large language models, and we'll segue into a couple other conversations. But at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Sean to kind of take us through this angle here today. Sean?
Excellent. So, one of the biggest things that we're running into and seeing when people talk about AI is no longer is the technology working, because now it works. We're seeing a lot of our clients coming to us and saying, "Hey, so and so is doing this. We want to do it too." Right? So the fast follow of generative AI is in full swing. Um, but here's the kicker, right? We're not interested in being the pioneers. The pioneering days of generative AI are going away. We're getting to a point where the CFOs of the world are saying, if you know the board has decided you must do this, but you must make money or save money in the process of this. So what's the ROI? What is your business plan to go with the technology? And so what we're hearing a lot of nowadays is how can we show generative AI's value? That's the first thing that is being discussed. Again, not about the technology. We've been talking about the technology and getting into a lot of the lower level things. Three out of the last five shows, we were going really, really far down the stack. And now we're coming all the way back up at the beginning. How do you start? Well, how do you start is understanding what kind of value is generative AI going to provide you. And so your use case will define what value. And then when you start adding up those use cases, you can start talking about what is the impact that generative AI is providing. Now, we talked start small and grow large before, so all of that you should have already heard from us. But with this, there are three areas that the industry, don't shoot the messenger here, but the industry has said that generative AI brings to the table. And then these are your lanes that you're going to be talking about. So if you're going to put together a business plan for somebody, you will want to talk about a subset of these. So my favorite is always new offerings. If you can generate more revenue, the pie gets larger and everybody's happy. And I come from a consulting background, so everybody happier is a big smile on everyone's face, including myself. It's a lot easier to get approvals with this, but with everything else, when you're talking about business value, you're going to have to predict it, and then you're going to have to show how you're obtaining it, and if you're not, why you're not. So remember, when you're putting together a business plan, it isn't something that you get to throw overboard as soon as you get the funding. You're going to have to continue to report how you're obtaining this value. So the next is to me the next easiest one to talk about, which is enhancing employees, right? How can I take that superhero cape and put it on my day-to-day employee? And all of a sudden, I've got, instead of a group of humans, I've got a group of superhumans. That, again, very straightforward. people talk about doing more with less, and we'll talk a lot about that on this call today. But enhancing employees so that they can do 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100% more productivity for those individuals. Um, the third is really what you hear about on the news. You're going to hear it from the naysayers. I try to avoid the reduced headcount discussion as much as possible,
Yep.
but it is the first and foremost of Wall Street. If you've seen the large tech companies who are posting record profits yet doing record layoffs, this is how they're showing value with generative AI. And we'll get into more details on these, but starting from the top here, these are the lanes. David, what are your thoughts? Did I miss any?
No, I don't think you missed anything. I just think that for those that are listening in leadership, the one thing you need to realize, even to Wall Street, to Sean's last point on reduction of headcount, and by no means am I telling anybody what to do. This is purely just an opinion and observation more than anything, is that these numbers, while they look really impressive right now, even though that the economy's in this balance of potentially runaway inflation, the key crux of this is that eventually all these numbers that look really good are going to circle back, and you're going to find yourself hiring employees again, because while AI does a great job and gives you the illusion that it's right, just know that you're creating like a sine wave effect. Huge profits, huge losses, right? Because you got to get that balance to where you can get kind of this plateau, this slow ramping of whatever, and it's the balance between 2 and 3. And Sean and I are both seeing in all industries and all sectors extremes to one or the other, and few. I'd say the 80-20 rule probably applies, maybe even only 10%, 10-90, are doing this the right way. And a lot of times Sean and I are getting brought in either too late or after the fact. So just the only thing to tell you to take away from this is to, if you're just embarking on this journey, definitely get some consultants, get a modicum of different opinions. And, if you really want to go out on a wing, get a really intelligent large language model and ask it to be your consultant from one of the big four or Bain or McKinsey or whoever, and get a couple of different perspectives. Like, get all your information and kind of figure that game out. This is not easy to do alone. So best of luck to everybody. We are here individually if you guys want to reach out to us, of course, but 2 and 3, this is this balancing act that probably one of the biggest decisions you're going to make of your career for the next 5 years, foreseeably.
Yeah, I mean, again, the understanding what this is and putting your name on it is why consultancy was designed. I mean, that is the core management consulting concept. And if you're ever questioning some of those, just look up how HBO changed their name 15 times in the last 3 years. So moving on, the best thing to focus in on when you're talking about generating value is to do the fast follow. I talked about this before. Hey, so-and-so is succeeding in this area, and I want to do it too. And these 3 areas right now, as far as I know, these are the top 3 areas that generative AI has proven time and time again to add value to your business. Add value to your team, add value to your division, whatever part you're ongoing. I mean, this works at the lowest level of startups and stealths, all the way up at the top in the Fortune 50s. So, these are the areas that I always say, what can generative AI do in these areas? And then you can add on top of this. And in a year from now, These three are probably going to be the top 10. Things are getting much more proven in the marketplace, but these are the proven use cases. First, we've talked about it repeatedly, which is the development acceleration. Not just the vibe coding, but bug fixing, identifying issues, test automation. I've shown on this channel how you build these. Large language models can do it for you. So that's how well these use cases are defined. They work within the large language models already.
Yep.
The second one, and I know David showed this a couple months back, the N8N, the automation, CX acceleration, driving more self-service, deflection, and higher levels of engagement. These are extremely well defined. The proof points are there. You can get a significant boost of productivity in these areas without sacrificing your brand and your brand safety. Our company did a great Forbes article around brand safety. So, whatever you do from a CX perspective, make sure you're protecting your brand. We've talked about safety with AI for quite some bit, and but in the grand scheme of things, with CX, there's a lot of victories to follow with.
Yep.
The last, to me, was always the first use case of generative AI, and that is content generation.
Yep.
I could tell you from a social media posting perspective, I am a much clearer communicator because of social media from content generation of large language models. I can write a blog that is absolutely coherent. I can share with people who are not in my field, and I can do so in a matter of minutes instead of hours. Huge. Writing press releases, just writing emails. Again, maybe I'll cover this one at one point, but I can tell you working, taking a holiday last month, had some massive disappointments from my travel providers. And I used generative AI to describe to them the level of disappointment I had. And I got the best response from them ever, right? This is going to make all of us superheroes. So the content generation is a use case that is proven time and time again. There are very little risks associated to these right now, and those risks are being mitigated more and more by the pioneers. If you are like me and saying, hey, I want to play it safe, what can I get from generative AI right now? It's these three that I talk about. David?
Yeah, so I think to add to everything that Sean's saying, and going back to the kind of the last comment that I had to everybody on the slide, and again, this is for you in leadership if you're listening, is the key here is going to be not only finding your superheroes. These are the people that are already using AI, are eager to use it, or have taken the initiative on their own to do it. One of the areas, and I think Sean, I don't want to speak for him, but I think I can almost safely say that he's witnessed this to some accord, that while these categorical areas are the top most successful and proven areas right now, in order for your company to get to its future state, somebody in your org, specifically in these key areas, needs to execute, needs to play with this. And so it's not always easy. Just because somebody uses AI, maybe they're not comfortable handing over parts of whatever it is that they do to AI, right? They're not sure how the workflow goes. They're not sure how to do it. This is where, going back to where I said a consultant will really, really help you out, because what you should definitely consider And this doesn't have to be a very expensive and even a long-term engagement. It's to get you over the chasm or get you over the hump. And that is have somebody handhold a handful, one or more of your team members, and walk them through a day in their life, inserting AI into their process or workflow, and watch their productivity increase tenfold. It could be as simple as a 4 to 6 week engagement. Find something that they do that really is a time suck for them in any of these key categories, or find the people that are on your payroll that cost the most and try to make them even more productive. This is really going to be your path forward, because again, these are proven, but there's resistance, boots on the ground, the people doing the work that are going to have to adopt it. The adoption is where you're going to have the challenge, is finding the people willing to move it. Or you have people doing it and they're eager and they're trying, but they're tripping over their own feet and they're getting stuck, and like all kinds of things are happening. So either way, doesn't matter how the use case scenario, the key to success in this is making sure that you can go through the entire step. And I'll leave the last part of this because this will probably come into there, but I'll plant the seed here early. You need measurability. Make sure you're measuring all of this so that you have a baseline against wherever you land at any given point in time over your journey, so you can measure your progress.
Yep, stealing my thunder already, David.
I was just planting the seed early.
So I talk about this all the time. Use case is what the value and the currency when you talk AI. Everything is AI nowadays. You start seeing AI pop in when you're ordering fast food, when you're ordering your groceries, when you get your bill, everything is AI now. So it all goes to the point of, what are you trying to accomplish with AI? Now, David made an excellent point about, reducing staff is very widespread right now. What I try to tell people is the goal should always be talent reallocation. Are you going to lose people? Yes, you will. That's just business. People are going to grow, and they're going to grow outside the bounds of the employment you could provide them, and you wish them well, and hope they come back at some point. Talent is really what matters. A company without employees is not a company. So if possible, reallocating talent, and but the people you want to keep are the ones that are embracing AI, who are growing within the bounds of AI and that tooling. So you always want to focus on keeping the best and growing them. There are going to be people out there, and this was back in the internet. This is the same thing. I don't know, David, if you remember people who are like, I will never reply to an email, or I'm not going to Google search, right? I've heard these comments. I'm old enough to remember the days that people say, if it's my job to use Google, then I don't want to do this job anymore. So there are going to be people who do not want to grow, and you let them move on and wish them well. But the people who do want to grow and do want to use the technology and be as productive as possible, reallocate them wherever possible. Again, from a development perspective, maybe you will have fewer IDE coders, right? That makes sense with use cases. Well, perhaps, you should be focusing and reallocating that on preventing bugs. Maybe you need people who need to do your documentation, and AI will do the majority of the documentation. Having somebody with a code mindset write documentation is a lot better than maybe a technical writer would be. And so you would be reallocating developers to do other jobs like better test automation capabilities, and so on and so on. You could keep moving your talented people into jobs that they wouldn't be qualified to do, but with AI, they can grow and be able to do. Doing more with less and grow and build organically. So with AI, your people can do more. That means instead of having fewer coders, you can have more rich releases. Maybe you can release more often. Maybe you can do more bug fixes, more feature requests, more versioning. Perhaps now's the time to add a second product, right? Maintaining the high quality of people that you have. And then basically your gains will be in more revenue generation or more. I can tell you this, I've never met a salesperson who says, you know what, Sean, if we had less features, we'd be able to sell it easier. It doesn't happen.
I'm laughing because I don't know how many salespeople, including some of our own that I've interacted with, overpromise, and then we're scrambling to try to figure out how we're going to implement a feature or the concept that everybody's heard of this vaporware.
I mean, what AI will effectively be able to do is allow salespeople to sell the impossible. You know, I had this conversation with our salespeople with a new strategy that we're using AI for, and they're like, "Wow, so we can close more business with fewer people, but because we're closing more business because we're undercutting because we're cheaper, we will be able to hire more people. We'll need more people."
Increase the volume. That's the success. That's the key.
And that was a very big surprise. Why would we hire more people if we have more productivity? Well, if you can sell a greater amount at a lower cost, the margin will go up and the volume will go up. So, you know, there's lots of mathematics that you can do to explain getting more value out of AI. Yep. And I would recommend you explore all of them. And AI is also empowering something which is not on this list, which is the more creative you are, the smarter you are with business, yep, the farther you'll go.
Agreed on all of those. And those are all great tactical points. Now, strategically, the one thing I would like to call out the leadership is going back to our slide one about the trend of trimming or losing. So Sean made excellent points on this slide. I heard him call it out. I also heard him call it out on the previous slide. And that is, you know, you can drag the horse to water. You can't make him drink, so to speak. So wish those people well, send them on their way. However, as leadership, as ownership, you're going to get to the point where, and Sean just mentioned this point about hiring more people, the volume's going to increase. You're going to find yourself in a situation to where there's going to be a shortage that you're going to find out in the general population, where you're going to need more people now, quicker, faster, but you need them with the skills, right? You need them to come on board. They need to have known how to use these tools or have been acclimated somewhere else. And the key here is that everybody, all your competition, including non-competition, is going to be, I think about it this way. If you're in medical and all of a sudden you lose a handful of people, they weren't bad people, but you did a really maybe not such a great job of retaining them or training them or bringing them along the way. And as a result, you kind of threw them out into the ether. So they went off on their own. They learned these skills and now they've moved verticals because they're doing the same job, but they don't need to be subject matter experts in their field anymore. That's where the AI comes in. but they are in maybe the same procurement role or the same customer service role or same customer success or patient care versus customer success. Either way, the bottom line is it's a very similar job, and now they've been trained either on their own or elsewhere. And the key point that I'm trying to make here is that you need to have a program in place to identify which employees are the employees that don't want to use Google, that don't want to carry a cell phone. In other words, come up to the latest technological trends. Those are the ones that you let go. But have yourself some internal think tanks, or what are those, hackathons, and have people try something within the scope of any of those other key areas that we showed you earlier on the other slide, and turn them loose, see what they do, and see who your top, the cream will rise to the top, right? And these are the ones that you want to get into those key positions, have them train trainers, right? You want to replicate that as much as you can, and then just get rid of the dead weight. And that's honestly where you're at in order to be able to accomplish a lot of this stuff. But don't make the mistake of not putting your good, talented employees to the test. Give them what they need to succeed, because if you throw them out into the ether, you're going to find yourself very shortly in the next couple of years going to market and not being able to find the resources you need. That's the next problem. If I had a crystal ball in the next probably, what would you say, Sean, 10 to 20 months, in that time frame somewhere, it's going to be feast and famine, and more famine than feast. Right now, you got the opportunity to keep what you have, but it's going to be slim pickings here shortly.
Yeah. Again, right now, AI is still disrupting the market. At some point, like I said, these 3 use cases I was talking about become 10, and then they become 50, and then they become 500. And then the only way to track the use cases are going to be asking the large language models themselves, right? Which we are already doing internally. We have so many use cases that we work with clients on. And use cases are everything. And I say this, and people just don't believe me at times. The technology is completely ubiquitous at this point. Right.
In 2 weeks, I've cranked out 8 months of worth of work. I'm not kidding. It's been that insane.
And you can now ask the technology to give you answers and teach you about the technology. It is completely ubiquitous. The business value, though, is not.
No, true.
So you cannot ask a large language model how to do this within your business, right? Who's what? Who's who in the zoo? This is where you come in play. So always keep an eye out where the value is and how to obtain it. Now, this is the most important part of the conversation, which is observability. Yes, you saw in the news a lot of people, very, very large companies that are the top 7 in the S&P 500. You've seen the news. They're like, with AI, we're laying all these people off. That is the easiest way to show value. If you can go through and just say, we're cutting 1,000 people, look at the value we created. It is very straightforward, but the risks involved with that, I come up with a great story about 18 months ago. There was a company out there, and they said, we no longer need CX agents. We're just going to deploy all AI. And they laid off all their people. They laid everybody. They laid off their HR. They laid off most of their finance. They went from a 5,000 person company down to a 50, and they made such big news on this. And then 3 or 4 months ago, they just announced, yeah, we had to do massive new hiring. We let our clients down. We let our customers down. We let our brand down. We made this mistake. And a lot of people are pointing to that company saying, look at the horrible mistake they made. No, At the end of the day is if you make your decisions on data, you're always going to be better off. It's always going to be the better decision. So what I tell people is start being a data-driven operations, right? Data-driven operation collects data. They measure, okay, this is what's going to come in, this is what's going to go out. When you put together a business case, this is the most important thing. What are your KPIs? How is it being driven? How are you going to measure it? That's another thing that I hear people all the time. Well, how am I going to measure that, Sean? There's always a way to measure it. You know, is it worth measuring? Is there a better way, a cheaper way to get the measurements? A lot of people, they deploy things, and then when they get asked, okay, show your work. Prove to me that you're generating this value. They look and go, okay, now how do we figure out how to do that after everything's been deployed? Well, then you're going to be changing user interfaces. You're going to be changing backend. You're going to be creating all these new problems that you need to solve. So remember, generative AI is like every other technology you deploy. At some point, the people who are giving you money to deploy it are going to want to make sure that that was a good idea. So if you like your position, if you like to maintain your position, if you hope to go above your current position, you really need to have the data to show what you're doing. One, because if you're successful, you will have bragging rights, right? Number two is if you're unsuccessful, you can change tactics, you can change strategy. I don't know how many times I've gone down the wrong way, but I don't wait a whole year. You know, 3 months is more than enough data for you to understand that you're doing something wrong. So that means you get 3 bites of the apple if you're on a fiscal year, right? Whereas if you wait to the end of the year and hope, you know, you may not. So don't be afraid to change direction. Just make sure you have the data to show it. And then plan your cradle to grave strategy. GenAI is going to go away. Whatever model you're using, I know this is very big now with GPT-5. I got this week where a client called me up and said, we built everything around this model. We've tested it on GPT-5, and it does not work as well. So the upgrade is a downgrade. What do we do? You know, this is the pain associated with a cloud provider of infrastructure. You know, at some point, your Linux server will no longer be able to run. Everything has obsolescence. So plan for your obsolescence. And that should be part of your observability strategy. At some point, you're going to run out of disk. At some point, you're going to have too many people and not enough resources. This is everything about IT that you should be aware of. Generative AI is just like any other technology, and you should plan accordingly. David?
Yeah, I'm going to go one bullet back, and then I'm going to circle back to what you just talked about, because you hit the nail on the head with the GPT-5, even in my own testing. And alarming, actually, you know what, we'll work our way backwards. We'll stay on this bullet and we'll go back. Because
did I find a wound?
Yeah, well, you kind of hit a kind of a sore spot that I just found, even in my own personal stuff. As of today, I tried to work on something because I use AI in some of my automations and stuff, and I was like, ugh. Anyway, the key here is that, or the long story short, I'll say, is that people like myself, people that are in the trench, leadership is probably not aware because, you know, they just get more of a higher level thing. But if you're in leadership and in the trench, or you're straddling between both leadership and production or delivery, you definitely need to listen. Okay, so recently, in addition to GPT-5 being announced just last week, I believe it was either earlier that week or the week prior. I think it was the week prior. OpenAI just announced their OSS version of their model that is their first ever open source model. And it is a snapshot and is performing, I think, as what was it, GPT 3.0, the really big flagship thinking model. So my key point in that is that part of the announcement of GPT-5 was the equal announcement that this is a true multimodal model, which means they are going to deprecate everything in the 4-line. They said that. Now, I don't know what the timeline is. I haven't really seen anything on that.
They've already backtracked.
But okay, well, because because of what Sean just said and some of the testing, I'm like, everybody's saying, oh, and you can fill in the expletive, but it was not pretty. So there needs to be a modicum of control, time for testing, part of your observability. Like, we're going just in circles here, right? It's going back to the software development lifecycle. You don't, if you're, whatever it is that you built upon in your stack, you have all these frameworks and dependencies, and that dependency and framework hell. It's the same thing here. Treat your large language model, look at it objectively as if it is a framework. Because if you're using a non-private trained, Sean did just last week or the week before, where he showed you how to do the training of a model. I think he used a small language model and kind of brought it up to speed and talked a lot about that. I think the reality is a lot of companies are going to need to start thinking along those lines as either your primary source of deployment, or if not, bring it into your plan B and have both strategies ready to go. And in addition to that, as your plan A and plan B goes, implement them into production, because you need to have a fallback. If the primary source fails, programmatically, you code it to go to the secondary route. That way your systems are not down. You know what to expect in both accords. And in your observability strategy, you need to add a monitoring component, because large language models are non-deterministic. That means if Sean asks me a question today and I answer it, tomorrow he asks me the same question, I'll give him a relatively similar answer, but it's not going to be word for word exactly the same. That's what I mean by non-deterministic. AI is the same, but there's a tolerance spec as to how far off of the beaten path I went. And you need that monitoring component in your observability strategy, or you're going to wind up in the short end of the stick really, really, really quick. The other thing, too, I wanted to circle back on defining the business metrics is just essentially what I led to. You need to have this monitoring component there. And in order to do the monitoring and in order for you to calculate ROI, you need to either proactively reach into the system or reactively capture telemetry coming out of said system or workflow or whatever it is. And all of this, none of this is going to work. And this is the pain that a lot of you have now, that either you're just finding out about or you don't even know you have yet. And that is, you've got all this stuff going on and you're like, okay, we're going to automate it. We're going to put AI, we're going to throw this, we're going to radically transform our business. Well, guess what? You missed this one key critical part to observability. You have no baseline. You have no idea how much it currently costs. You have no idea how long the runtime happens. And because it's human driven, a lot of it, you have no idea the fluctuations in the good, the bad, and the ugly, or the meat and the bounds. On the best day of or week or process run, you might run 12 hours. On a bad use case, it could run 18 hours. And so you take the median, split the difference. But bottom line is, you need to know what your baselines are before you convert or while you're converting. Otherwise, observability carries no weight. No baseline, no observability. It's just a hard fact truth. So make sure you include your baselining as number one key priority before or while you're switching over. If you've already switched over, you might have already lost the opportunity, unfortunately, because the data is just not going to be there, or the people aren't going to be doing it for you to set either a manual point or an automated point to try to watch this type of stuff. So just a couple of key critical adds to that. Sean?
Yeah. So, want to wrap this up. About a year ago now, I wrote a blog around this. So it's really interesting. You can look at the QR code in the far right. That's my day job. But it should kind of illustrate the fact of what's changed and what hasn't changed in this concept in the last year. And some things, as far as technology, change all the time. David, I think we should definitely have just a jam session talking about models and why there are different ones and what are the different ones and what we feel about them. That would be really cool. But that changes all the time. I mean, GPT-5, there's an open source open AI model. There's a reasoning model I really love called Cogito. There is all kinds of really interesting things out there that we could talk about, but that's changing all the time. When it comes down to business, and most importantly, getting value from AI, the lessons have already been learned. And I would recommend heed those lessons so that you don't get run over by AI. You should always master the technology, not have the technology master you, right? I say this: be the disruptor, not the disrupted.
My famous analogy is don't let the tail wag the dog.
Yeah. So really appreciate the time today. And, comment, let us know what you're up to. What are some interesting topics you'd like us to address and things to go down? I know I'm doing a lot of agent teaching, and I'm just started a little project around a knowledge-based engine. So there's lots of really cool things that you can do out there. I'd love to hear from you all what's cool for you to see. David?
Yeah. So again, we're here every Wednesday, guys. If you want to follow me on LinkedIn, every day I've got a blog. I hit a different vertical, a different industry, talk about whatever is related in scope to that industry, to whatever the current news is article for that day. Try to keep up with it. But if you want to just kind of do and follow all of that, that's great. Sean and I both have blogs that we post on LinkedIn as well as other places. So check us out also at the Transformation Leaders Podcast. We recently just updated the website. So we'd love to hear from you there. Nice quick form. You fill it out. It goes both to Sean and I directly. And again, we're here every Wednesday. So that's it for this week's show. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.